All right, so I'm going to start by saying I've been shoeing horses in Minnesota. I grew up in New Mexico, and I moved after I graduated college. I moved to Minnesota. That's about 6 years ago, and ever since then I've been a full-time farrier. So I've got about 6 years of being a full-time farrier, and I moved like anybody moved to a new place. You don't have a lot of work. So I told myself when I moved that I would start making all my own shoes for the horses as I got them. And so I could kind of build my business and make everything handmade. And it was just a goal of mine to start out doing. And now I have a full-time business, and I still make pretty much 100% of what I put on. I don't shoe anything special or fancy or anything. I just shoe mostly some Western horses, some trail horses, some rodeo horses. I do some eventers, some dressage, lower level dressage horses, nothing crazy, but I make 100% of what I put on. I don't think that that's something to necessarily be proud of or like tell you guys that so you're impressed by me. The reason I started doing it is because I wanted to have a serious foundation in basics. And I think that basics in this trade is super duper important, and I think it gets overlooked a lot. So I've been on the American Farriers team for a couple years, 4 years, and once I got on that team, combined with making my shoes for my feet every day, it definitely, learning from the guys on the team and being on that team, definitely opened my eyes to how to make shoes match with the feet you trim every day. I think that's a super duper simple thing, but it's super duper hard to master, to match your shoe with your trim every day. I shoe every day pretty much like I would on Thursday, what we're going to do on Thursday. Like, I don't differ a lot from that kind of style of shoeing. I don't personally believe that you need to differ from perimeter fitting a foot every day very much. I think there's very little things you can do to either back a foot up when you need to or fit a foot different than perimeter. Perimeter fitting is pretty much the basic style of shoeing, and I don't think that you have to get that far away from that basic very often. And I definitely don't on everyday shoeing. So the first thing that being on the team really opened my eyes to was trimming your feet with 3 points of transition. If you can trim your feet soft shapes and make 3 points of transition, I believe that there is a toe where it transitions from medial to lateral. There's a point in the toe, and I think that there's a point on the inside quarter, a point on the outside quarter. If you believe in those 3 points, you can make your shoe with 3 points of transition on the anvil. And if those quarters in your shoe are in the same spot as the quarters in your foot, they'll match up pretty close most of the time. If you keep those basic fundamentals in your head when you're trimming and when you're shoemaking. And it's simple, but again, it's super duper hard to master. And I think that the basics, man, you see them overlooked all the time. People want to make roadsters right out of the gate. I see a lot of young kids that want to just start making roadsters right off the bat. And it's like, you should make monotonous 3/4 fuller shoes or plain stamp shoes until you got them sorted out. So, and I've been making them, I make so many shoes for horses' feet, it's stupid. It's really dumb, but I do it. And it's monotonous, but when you do it so much, you start to understand the little things that help you fit them on your feet every day. And so, what I'm going to try and talk about today is some of those things that I've picked up in that 6 years of doing that. And so I think that the first thing is, how do you measure for what to cut on a horse's foot? I would say that the basic style of measurement is either with a ruler, width and length, or circumference. I think a lot of times, if you try it on feet, width and length plus 1.5 inches will be pretty close to circumference minus 1.5 inches on a lot of feet. And that's pretty much your basic style of measurement. You're going to do width and length plus 1.5 inches for a normal saddle horse foot, plus whatever you bump into your shoe, for the most part. So if you're planning on bumping a 1/2 inch into your shoe and you keep that 1/2 inch in your toe, then you add 2. I would say that that's pretty basic. I think for concave, you're not bumping anything. So width and length plus 1.5 inches is pretty close. And circumference minus 1.5 inches will be pretty close to that same number. It'll vary a little bit, but a lot of times in a contest when I'm measuring a foot, I'll take both of those measurements. I'll do width and length, and I'll take the circumference, and I'll see which one, if they're close. And if they're a 1/4 inch apart, I might cut in the middle of that. Another thing you gotta pay attention to is the width of the heels. If your heels are real wide, it's not gonna take as much steel to cover that foot, right? If your heels are real wrappy, it's gonna take a little more foot. So usually, if your heels are wider than half of your width, then you wanna subtract a little bit of from your measurement. If they're narrower, if they're closer together than half your width, then you'll add a little bit, depending on how much that is. Usually a 1/4 inch or so. So that's pretty basic, getting you going on making shoes so you can measure your foot and make a shoe. The next thing that I would say that's super important is offset in your shoes. So depending on what style of shoeing you like to do, what kind of fit in the back half of your foot you like to do is going to determine your offset. So the more you sweeten your inside, the reason you would sweeten your inside is because when you shoot for center of stock, fitting your foot, when you fit your foot, it's just normal to try and fit center of stock. Right? Because you want your width of your section to be double the thickness of your hoof wall. So you can punch your nails center and you come out in the white line. So if you fit center in the heels, in order to fit the medial tighter and be safer, I like to narrow up the medial branch a little bit. Then you can fit center and it's tighter, closer to the foot. The outside of your shoe is closer to the foot. So when you sweeten that shoe up, you obviously get more length out of your section, right? So you offset your shoe to account for that. Depending on how you forge, and if you don't like to do that, maybe you don't like to do that. Maybe you just like to fit the inside as wide and full as you like to fit the outside. I don't know, it's whatever you prefer, or whatever you're trying to accomplish. But depending on how much you sweeten that inside or don't sweeten it is how much you have to shoot for offset. Offset is important because when I toe clip a lot of feet. I toe clip a lot of front, mostly all fronts, and I toe clip a lot of hinds. And the reason being that is because I think that if you trim your foot right, I don't think there's a need to come underneath the foot at all. I think perimeter fitting works out just great for me. Everyone's got their own opinion. That's neither here nor there, but works good for me. So when I try and set my shoe up, I'm shooting for my toe clip to be in the center of my toenails, right? So when I scribe my shoe, I want my toenails across from each other. I want my toe clip to be in the center of that, where I center punch my shoe in the beginning. When I go and fit that shoe on the foot, I'm going to shoot for having my toe clip be in line with the frog, where the frog points. If I shoot for that, that's where I've trimmed my foot to have my transition from medial to lateral, right? When I trim my foot, I'm shooting for my transition to be where the frog points. I believe that that's where the foot transitions from medial to lateral. That's my first point. Usually when I toe clip, that's where I'm going to toe clip my shoe. That's where I'm building my shoe to. My shoe is getting built to the toe clip to transition from medial to lateral. So when I put my toe clip in my foot, I'm putting it where that frog points. No matter what, I don't care where the heels are on the shoe. If your offset is right in your shoe, you'll have ample amount of material to cover your lateral and ample amount of material to cover your medial. That's what you try and figure out every day. That's what, when you build shoes for horses' feet every day, you fudge that offset constantly. You'll go to where you offset 3/16 and you'll start putting them on feet. And you'll be like, man, I'm having to grind the outside heel of these quite a bit. So then you start to wander back to 1/8 inch. And you'll put them on for a week, and you start to think, well, man, I'm having to grind my inside heel quite a bit. So it's a constant battle to keep it in between, but you've got to figure out where that spot is for you. The second thing that's important is your heels and how you fit your heels. I think that what I've found shoeing every day is that I definitely like to fit feet. I like to fit feet center stock, but I don't like to fit with much length. I'm just not into fitting with too much out the back. I like width, but I don't like a lot of length. So depending on if you like to fit tighter and longer, or shorter and wider, or short and tight, however you prefer to fit, your heels have to be made how you'd like to fit. The more your check is to the outside of your shoe, the more you'll fit wide and not as long. And I'll show you on making this heel. I think I've always, when I put them on feet, I try and push the outside check as far to the inside as I can and leave my inside check short. Because I think that when you put them on feet, you can grind. It's way easier to rasp or grind this inside check in farther than it is to come all the way around the outside of the heel and grind or rasp all of that off. So if you forge your heel around to where it's shorter on the inside than it is on the outside, you can fit a lot tighter and shorter and still fit with width and not be as far out the back. And I'll show you the style of heel that I like to put on most of my shoes, just because I think it's a pretty tidy way to make one, and it's a lot less hassle. And if you find yourself coming pretty short, you can always cover the buttress without having to throw a bunch of steel out the back. The more you have a check on your shoe on the inside of your branch, the more you have inside check, the more chance you have of, if the heel is real wrappy, to not cover that heel and miss it. You'll have to hook the end of the branch around to cover, and your shoe won't look as nice, and sometimes you might miss the buttress, which is kind of a no-no.
most of heel building is coming back into your tong hand. You don't ever want to pinch the section when you're building your heel. Always want to come back into your tong hand. Alright, so So this is pretty basic heel I like to put on all the shoes that I put in my truck. This outside, if you can see, this outside comes around and it's still pretty close to center, but it's coming around and I don't have much inside check, right? So I can fit with all this width and it's still, you can see my buttress can be as close to the end of the steel as I want, and I can have all this width, right? So you can fit as short as you want with still having ample amount of width. And if you fit a little bit longer, it's super easy to grind this check in longer, as long as you need it to be to clear the frog, right? So if you find that hovering on the frog, it's super easy to get that away from the frog. But you have this all forged around, so you have nothing, no material out here to grab or to be pulled. It's a basic heel, but I'll show you what I mean by having a long check. Alright, so this one, this is B. You put a check like this on a foot if you're going to fit longer. Because you see, to fit center, you have this clean check here, but say you're going to be short. If your buttress sticks over here, if it's here, you have to rasp all this off to make it not hang out in the middle of no man's land. Right? But if you have this material pushed over here, then it covers no matter what, and you can clean the inside easy. I just think that this heel, to me, fits on way more feet than this one does. Especially if you're coming out to the quarter and around back in with the heel. Alright, another thing real quick I wanted to touch on was this is 11.5 inches. If I want to make a front, I usually make about a 3/16 offset for fronts for me. I like to sweeten up the inside. And that usually works out about right. And I just know that from making a bunch of shoes. It's like you're not really going to find out what's right for you unless you make a pile of them and put them on feet. So, when I come out to make a toe bends are really important, I think. I think the toe bends set up your whole shoe. If you can make a good toe bend,
I find that usually your toe bend kind of steers the direction of your shoe. If your toe bend is nice, your shoe will come out nice, for the most part. If I have a messed up toe bend, I fight it the whole way through the shoe. It's physically impossible to make a symmetrical, it's impossible to make a symmetrical toe bend, right? I don't believe that toes and feet are symmetrical. I think that there's a left and a right foot, right? They're different. I think that feet tend to have a straighter outside toe and a bolder medial toe, front and hind. That's what I've found trimming and fitting feet. I think that the outside drops off slightly and comes out to the quarter, and I think that the medial toe is slightly bolder with less quarter. The two spots on a horse's foot I've found that are the hardest to fit are the medial toe, the lateral quarter. I think that that is where you see people miss the most. I've been to a lot of horse shoeing contests, a lot of certifications, seen a lot of people shoe horses, and I think that that's the hardest part to fit on a foot. Medial toe, lateral quarter. You rarely find yourself being tight in the lateral toe or tight in the medial quarter. It just doesn't happen.
Why do you think that is? Is the boldness of going?
Because I think that people like to make things symmetrical. They like to try to make things symmetrical. And you try and put something that's symmetrical on an asymmetrical foot, I don't think it works. I think that cake shoes are symmetrical, which they have to be, right? Because they're mass producing them. So it's your job when you put on a cake shoe is to take the symmetry out of it to make it fit your foot. I think people get lazy and don't want to take the symmetry out of it, and that's when they start to cheat things. Cheat the medial toe, cheat the lateral quarter. So, like I said, it's extremely hard to make something symmetrical, and that's not our goal. Our goal is to make it look like the horse's foot. So, when I make a toe bend, I'm going to shoot for having my asymmetry be in the right spots, right? I'm going to shoot for my lateral toe to be straighter and come out farther out of the toe. I'm going to shoot for my medial to be bolder. I'm going to just seat this out a little bit. If I'm not going to bump it, I usually seat it out just to get the section a little wider. So, on my lateral, I'm not caring as much about getting any boldness in that toe as I am making sure that my lateral branch stays out to the quarter. I want it to come way out so it'll catch that outside quarter, because I think that the outside quarter is pretty important to cover. The inside, I'm a little more worried about keeping boldness in that toe, and I'm not as much worried about coming out to the quarter because most feet that I've seen don't have a real extreme medial quarter. Alright, so this is what I'm talking about here. This is pretty good, I think. If you can see, I've got my lateral, it dumps off a little bit more and goes way out to the it's way kicked out, the center line. Can you see? Here, let's put it up on the, can everybody see that or no? We come right over the top. So if you see the center line of the shoe right there, you can see how much farther the lateral is away from the medial. Can you come up just a little bit further and look over the top? So this is my lateral branch.
it's out a little further than my medial is. I got good boldness in my medial toe, my lateral comes out to the quarter. That's pretty asymmetrical toe bend, but it's going to cover all my bases when I go to fit it on the foot. When I mark my toenails, you always mark your toenails on the back edge. You want your toenails to be on the back edge of your toe. So I line my toe up, and when you line your toe up on the anvil, you want to always make sure that you imagine your center punch hanging on a nail, like your shoe hanging on a nail on a wall. And you want your center punch to be right above that nail when you have it on the anvil. So you're trying to make your center punch be right center in the toe. And then you can scribe the back edge of the toe, and that's where your toenails need to be. Toenails right at the back edge of the stop. Usually you set your nails up to where they're just outside of center, and I'm pitching my nails to center. Pitch is a pretty important thing, I think. It's a big plus in making your own shoes, is being able to put pitch on the nail holes. With pitch, you can drive your nails a lot higher in the foot. You can definitely be a little more, you don't have to be as precise with your nails if you have pitch on them, because you can really, if you get them a little fine and they're pitched good, you can really pitch them up you can really shoot them up the side of the foot. Very rarely when I build an outside branch on a shoe, do I want to knock the shoe in front of the quarter. That'll get you in a lot of trouble. So I want to focus on bending the shoe at the quarter and not bringing it around before the quarter, right? So I'm shooting, I got a mental image in my head of where the quarter is on my foot, and I'm going to try and put that quarter in my shoe in the same spot. If your branch seems like it's a little open, I'd rather leave it open than knock it shut and have it be underneath, on the outside for sure. I want to leave my outside branch open. So again, my heel, I'm going to build it like that first one I built, and really push that check all the way to the inside. Look at where I think my quarter's going to be. When I talk about knocking it in before the quarter, what I mean is very rarely do you want to knock it in right there. Most of the time you want to open it right here, so you can catch that quarter. So I open it to the quarter. Once I get to the quarter, I'm going around. I'll do it one more time. Open it to the quarter. Once I get to the quarter, go around. The heel nail needs to be just in front of your quarter. You don't want to be nailing behind the quarter of the foot. Outside quarters are usually a little later than inside quarters on front feet, I think. Generally speaking, I think the outside is just a touch lower than the inside. So I have my second point of transition in my shoe. I've got my toe. There should be a point of transition here. And then I have a point of transition in my quarter. There's a soft, gradual arc from my toe to my quarter and from my quarter to my heel. That's all very subtle. But I have a definite point in my toe, definite point in my quarter. If you focus on trimming your feet, where you have those definite points, but it's a soft shape, from what I learned from being on the team, we had to fit feet really fast. Stone you have to fit really fast to do any good. And what we found is if you trim soft shapes in your feet, those 3 points of transition, build your shoes, 3 points of transition, soft shapes, put your quarters in the right spot. If you cut the right amount of steel and your shoe is the right width, it has to match up. It can't not match up. That's what we're trying to perfect. I'm a big believer in fitting the sides of the feet good. I like to get out and around the quarters in my foot. I think that cheating the quarters is a big sin. Every day, I've definitely found that my feet hold up a lot better if you don't cheat the quarters. I try and make that my ultimate goal when I'm shoeing, is fitting the quarters. And I think that the more you realize the quarters are there, the better you can try to fit them. So this is the inside. I'm sweetening up this inside because I want to fit it tighter than my outside just to be safer. I'm not going to put a huge medial quarter in there because I know I got a good medial toe. Once I have my shoe punched, it's super important before I go into clip to make sure that it fits in the box. And I got it. I must have marked it backwards. Yeah, I center punched it the wrong way. That's all right. Alright, so when I talk about the box, this one does not fall into the box because it sucks. But when you talk about fitting it into the box, I'm shooting for my toenails to be across from each other, right? You don't want them racked up or down. You want your toenails to be across. If your toenails are in behind the back edge of the toe, your heels should fall underneath your toenails, right? That's your goal. You don't want your shoe windswept one way or the other. Meaning, if your outside heel is way underneath, then that's going to make your inside heel be way out. And your shoe will be swung and it won't fit. This one is marked the opposite it should be. But my heels, my outside is just a little bit out from my inside because it's just wrong. I could make another one, but I don't know how much time I got. How much time do I got? Huh? 10 minutes? I can make one in 10. So if your heels fall underneath your toenails, then your shoe's not swung one way or the other, and it'll fit on the foot if you line your toenails up. When I go to the foot, my toe clip should be in the center of my toenails. If I put my toenails perpendicular to the center line of the frog, my toe clip will be where the frog points. If my heels are underneath my toenails, the heels in your foot should be underneath where your toenails will sit on your foot. So if your quarters are in the right spot, your shoes the right width, your heels fall under your toenails, it'll match up with your foot. 9 times out of 10 it will. That's the basics of what I try to accomplish every day. When I make shoes in my shop, I try and match those parameters, and I think that they usually go right on feet. If you can just accept the fact that horses have a big outside quarter and a slightly bolder medial toe, offset your shoe right like I didn't do on that first one. We'll get to the punching. So I did a one heat on the inside and the toe bend. The way I can check this to make sure that I have my branch right is what I was talking about. Your toenails are, you set your shoe on the anvil, use the corner of your anvil as a grid. Make sure your toenails are lined up with the corner of the anvil. And I want to sight down this branch and make sure that my heel falls underneath my toenail. Depending on how much quarter I want, I can kick this out, bring my heel around, or I can just kick my whole branch under to get it underneath. So I know that my inside is a little bit hanging. If I were to leave that hanging like it is, when I build my outside branch, your eye wants the heels to be the right amount apart, no matter what. So if this heel is hanging, when you build your outside branch, you'll push that outside underneath more than it should be. If you fix this inside right now, then when your eyes want to make your heels the right amount apart, you'll have this branch right. So I'll kick this heel around and then I'll go to my outside. When I fail one way or the other, I want to fail with my shoe being windswept to the outside, definitely. I think it's way easier to open up your inside branch a little bit and bring your outside heel around than it is to open up your outside to go out to that quarter. So if I want my shoe windswept one way or the other, or fail one way or the other, I definitely want it to be windswept to the outside. Try and push that outside all the way around. It's hard to hit the outside of the heel, so people don't do it a lot. That's why you see everybody having big old checks on the inside. Because it's easy to hit this side. It's hard to hit this side. When I line my shoe up, I want to do the same thing. Make sure that my center punch is like I'm hanging on a nail on the wall. Just on the back edge. Close my shoe up a little bit. Alright, so when I look at this, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look at this back edge and I'm going to make sure that my toenails are on the face of the anvil. I'm using the corner of my anvil as a grid. My inside is kicked under just a little too much. And my outside just needs a little bit more to match. That won't fit on a foot the way it is right now because I know that my heel should fall right under my toenails. So going to the foot at this point is useless because my shoe doesn't look like a foot. So if I open up that inside, kick my outside around, it should be a little closer. I'll clip it real quick and we can be done. I usually always try and shoot for having my clip be in the center of my two nails, of my toenails. I think that's pretty important for just the shoemaking aspect of it. You want everything to be square on the foot. When you pick up the foot and the shoe's nailed on there, you want your toenails to be square across the front of that foot. You want your toe clip to be in the center of those nails. So then I'll do the last little preparations of fixing my shape. Make sure that I got good coming out to the outside quarter. Make sure that my toe on my medial is not dropped off in any way. Then when I do before I go to the foot every time, I always make sure that my heels check out. It's no sense in going if they're not in the right spot. So I can open up my inside a little bit and close my lateral a little bit. And I always try and make sure that I have my definite 3 points. I've got a transition in my toe. I've got a soft arc to my definite medial quarter. I've got a soft arc to my definite lateral quarter. And then my heels are underneath my toenails. Then if you go and your width is correct, the same width as your foot, it's about 5 3/8. If that's the same width as your foot, then you can go to the foot and see if you're close. But it's really, if you don't have those basics in your shoe, it's really a waste of time to go to the foot because it's not going to fit. I can tell you it's not. So I think that's what's important to me, and what I think will kind of shortcut your way into making shoes fit on your feet a little easier. I think that's about all I got. Should be out of time, huh?